My name is Carol Fulton, 34 years old, and the part that still makes my stomach twist is this. The woman who married my father 2 years before he died thought she was about to inherit everything he had left. The house, the furniture, the quiet little backyard where my mother used to plant tomatoes, even the memories. She had no idea that none of it was his to give. My dad was going into hospice the following week, and the whole situation had already become unbearable. We all knew it was coming. His doctors had stopped using careful words months before that. They started saying things like comfort care and family preparation, and every time I heard those phrases, it felt like someone was slowly closing a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But grief was only half of it. The other half was Sandy and her daughters Tina and Beth, walking through my father's house like they had already won something. Except it wasn't my father's house. It was mine. I bought it 7 years earlier, after my mother died and my father's whole life collapsed. My parents had been together for more than 30 years. They were the kind of couple who argued about coupons and then shared one blanket on the couch 5 minutes later. When my mom passed, something in my dad went quiet. He lost his job a few months later. Then he couldn't keep up with rent. Then came the eviction notice. I still remember him calling me from his car, trying to sound calm while his voice cracked. "I just need a little time, Carol." He didn't need time. He needed a home. So I bought him one. Nothing huge, just a small house in an older neighborhood, with creaky floors, a narrow kitchen, and a backyard big enough for his dog Charlie to run in circles. I put the house in my name because I paid for it, but I never said that in a way that made him feel small. To me, it was his home. He needed dignity more than he needed paperwork, and Charlie was part of that dignity. Charlie had been my mother's dog before he became my father's shadow. After Mom died, Charlie followed Dad from room to room like he was afraid another person he loved might disappear. On weekends, I'd visit, and Charlie would lose his mind the second my car pulled up. Dad and I would grill burgers in the backyard, Charlie sleeping in the grass between us, and for a while, the house felt warm again. Then Sandy came along. At first, I wanted to like her. She was polite, soft-spoken, always touching my dad's arm when she laughed. She brought casseroles and called him James in this sweet voice that made him smile. When he told me they were getting married, I swallowed my doubts because he looked happy for the first time in years. Then Sandy moved in. Then Tina moved in. Then Beth moved in. One by one, their things filled the house. Floral curtains replaced my mother's old blue ones. Boxes appeared in the hallway. My father's recliner got pushed into a corner because Tina wanted better flow in the living room. Beth turned the spare bedroom into a vanity room, even though Dad used to keep Mom's photo albums there. Every time I visited, my dad seemed smaller. Then they went after Charlie. Beth started saying he made her uncomfortable. Charlie was 12 years old, half deaf, and slept most of the day. But Beth acted like he was a wolf circling the house. Sandy backed her up immediately, saying maybe it was time to think about a better arrangement. A better arrangement. Like Charlie was a broken lamp. My dad didn't argue. That was what broke me. He just looked down at Charlie and rubbed his ears, his hand shaking. So I said, "Charlie can live with me." Dad looked relieved and devastated at the same time. Sandy smiled like she had solved a household problem, but I knew what it really was. Control. Charlie was the last living piece of my mother still moving through that house, and they wanted him gone. After that, I brought Charlie with me every time I visited. Tina rolled her eyes. Beth acted terrified. Sandy asked me not to bring him anymore. I looked her straight in the face and said, "Charlie is family. He stays while I'm here." She didn't like that, but I wasn't asking. By the time Dad's health got worse, the house barely felt like his anymore. Sandy made the decisions. Tina spoke over him. Beth complained about everything connected to his old life. And my father, tired and sick, just let the noise pass over him. Then came the hospice news. I brought Charlie to see him one last time before he was moved. The second Charlie stepped into Dad's room, my father's face changed. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Charlie struggled onto the bed and curled against him like no time had passed. Dad whispered, "I miss this old guy." I had to look away because I knew I was about to cry. For a few minutes, it was just us again. Dad, Charlie, me, and the ghost of my mother in every quiet corner of that room. Then Sandy walked in without knocking. Her eyes landed on Charlie. "I thought I asked you not to bring that dog here." I stood up slowly. "He's here to say goodbye to my father." Beth appeared behind her and muttered, "Good riddance. I'm glad we won't have to deal with him after this." Something inside me went cold. Before I could answer, Dad said softly, "Let them be." It was barely above a whisper, but Sandy shut her mouth. When I left, Tina was in the living room scrolling on her phone. As I passed, she said, "Can't wait until we never have to see that dog again." I stopped at the door, Charlie's leash wrapped tight in my hand. Then I said, "You won't." And I walked out knowing something they didn't. They thought my father's death would make that house theirs. But every wall, every floorboard, every legal document had my name on it. After that last visit, I knew I couldn't keep pretending Sandy and her daughters were just difficult house guests. They were waiting. I could feel it in the way they moved through the rooms, in the way Tina talked about repainting the kitchen, in the way Beth mentioned turning Dad's room into a better space once things were settled. Settled. That was the word she used while my father was still breathing. A few days later, I went back without Charlie, not because Sandy had won that fight, but because I wanted this conversation to be clean. No distractions, no emotional excuse for them to twist. Sandy was in the living room with Tina and Beth, watching some reality show with the volume too high. They looked annoyed when I stepped in, like I had interrupted their afternoon instead of walking into the house I paid for. I said, "We need to talk." Sandy paused the TV. "About what?" "About what happens after my father passes." The room changed instantly. Tina stopped scrolling. Beth crossed her arms. Sandy's face tightened, but not with grief. With calculation, I said, "Specifically, the house." Sandy leaned back like she had already prepared for this. "James wanted us to stay here." "I understand that's what you believe," I said. "But after he's gone, things are going to change. If you want to keep living here, you'll need to pay rent." Beth laughed. "Rent? Are you serious?" "Very serious." Tina sat up, red-faced already. "We've been living here for years. This is our home." "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's where you've been living." Sandy stood slowly. "You're really going to do this? After everything we've done for your father?" That nearly made me laugh. Everything they had done, like pushing his recliner out of the room, like treating Charlie as a threat, like making a dying man ask permission to keep pieces of his own life. I said, "I've spoken to a lawyer. You'll have 3 months after Dad passes. Either pay fair market rent or find somewhere else to live." Beth's mouth dropped open. "So you're throwing us out?" "I'm giving you options." Tina snapped. "You're greedy." That word hit less than she probably wanted it to. Greed was living rent-free in a house someone else bought, while planning what to do with the bedrooms after the owner's father died. Greed was calling an old dog a problem because he reminded you this family existed before you arrived. I just said, 3 months, that's more than fair. Sandy's eyes narrowed. James would never allow this. I looked at her for a long moment. James isn't the one paying the mortgage, taxes, insurance, or repairs. She blinked, but she still didn't understand. Not yet. I left before they could turn it into a screaming match. From the driveway, I could hear Tina's voice rising inside. Beth kept saying, "She can't do that." Sandy said something lower, something I couldn't make out, but I knew the tone. It was not fear. It was planning. Then my father died. Even when you know death is coming, it still feels like betrayal when it arrives. One day his hand was warm in mine. The next, the nurses were speaking gently, and I was signing forms with a pen I could barely hold. At the funeral, Sandy cried loudly. Tina held her shoulder. Beth dabbed her eyes with a tissue and checked her phone between hymns. I stood beside Charlie's empty leash in my purse because I couldn't bring myself to leave it at home. My father deserved better than the ending he got, but at least he wasn't in pain anymore. I waited a few days after the funeral, not because Sandy deserved more time, but because I did. I needed to breathe before I walked back into that house and ended their fantasy. When I arrived, they were all in the living room again. Same couch, same TV, same careless laughter. My father had been buried less than a week. I stood in the doorway until Sandy noticed me. "We need to talk about the house," I said. She sighed, irritated. "We already talked about this. We're staying here like James wanted." "No," I said. "You're not." Tina scoffed. "Here we go again." I reached into my folder and pulled out the deed, the purchase paperwork, and copies of the tax records. My hands were calm. That surprised me. "This house was never my father's," I said. "It's mine. I bought it after my mother died. The deed has always been in my name." For the first time since I had known her, Sandy had nothing to say. Beth leaned forward. "What?" I placed the papers on the coffee table. "Dad lived here because I wanted him safe. I let you all stay because he was still alive, and I didn't want to make his life harder. But he's gone now, so the arrangement ends." Sandy picked up the deed like the words might change if she stared hard enough. "James never told me this. He didn't have to." "This is our home," she whispered. "No, it was my father's shelter, and you treated it like a prize." Tina stood up fast. "You can't just kick us out!" "I can, but I'm still giving you 3 months. Pay rent or leave." Sandy's eyes filled with angry tears. "He promised me we'd be taken care of." I felt something sharp move through my chest. Maybe sadness, maybe rage. "He was dying, Sandy, and while he was dying, you were planning where to put your furniture." Beth started crying then, but even that felt rehearsed. Tina called me cruel. Sandy said my father would be ashamed of me. I looked at all 3 of them and thought about Charlie curled beside Dad, giving him the only peace he had in that house. Then I said, "No, he'd know exactly why I'm doing this." I walked out while they were still yelling. Behind me, Sandy screamed, "This isn't over!" And for once, she was right. Sandy kept her promise. Less than 3 weeks after I revealed the deed, I was sitting at work when someone from the front desk called and said, "Carol, there's a process server here asking for you." The moment I saw the envelope, I knew. Sandy was suing me. I actually laughed before I even opened it. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go. She had seen the deed with her own eyes. She knew the house had always belonged to me. Yet somehow she believed a lawsuit would change reality. According to the complaint, she claimed my father had verbally promised her the house after his death. She argued that, as his wife, she had every right to remain there permanently. She even claimed she and her daughters had invested years into maintaining the property and deserved ownership. By the time I finished reading, I shook my head. There wasn't a single piece of evidence attached. I called my attorney that afternoon. After reading the complaint, he smiled and said, "Carol, this case has almost no chance of succeeding. They don't own the property. They never did." "Then why file it?" "Because people confuse hope with legal rights." Those words stayed with me. The hearings began about 2 months later. Walking into the courthouse felt strangely peaceful. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry anymore either. Mostly, I was tired. Sandy arrived wearing black, as if she were still playing the grieving widow. Tina and Beth followed behind her, avoiding eye contact until we entered the courtroom. Then suddenly they looked devastated, hoping appearances might accomplish what facts couldn't. Their attorney argued that my father had repeatedly promised Sandy she could stay in the home forever. My attorney stood. "Can you produce a deed?" "No." "A will?" "No." "A written agreement?" "No." "Any document transferring ownership?" Again, "No." Every answer made Sandy sink a little lower in her chair. Then came my turn. I calmly explained everything. After my mother passed away, my father had nowhere to go. I purchased the house using my own savings. Every mortgage payment, every tax bill, every insurance premium had come directly from my accounts. My father had simply lived there because I wanted him to have stability during the hardest years of his life. The judge quietly reviewed every document: the original purchase contract, bank statements, property tax records, insurance policies. 7 years of paperwork. Every page carried only one name: mine. Then Sandy tried another angle. She claimed she had spent thousands improving the property. My attorney immediately produced photographs from before and after she moved in. The judge compared them carefully. "So," he finally asked, "what substantial improvements were made?" Sandy hesitated. "We painted some rooms." My attorney nodded politely. "Would you agree painting walls does not transfer legal ownership of real estate?" There was no response. The courtroom became painfully quiet. Then Tina asked if she could speak. The judge allowed it. She stood and said, "We've lived there for years. It's our home." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because living somewhere for free doesn't make you the owner. The judge looked at her gently. "I understand this is emotionally difficult," he said, "but residency does not equal ownership." Beth started crying. Sandy stared straight ahead. For the first time since my father married her, there was no confidence left in her expression, only fear. After a short recess, everyone returned for the decision. The judge didn't waste much time. "The evidence clearly establishes that Ms. Carol Fulton has been the sole legal owner of the property since its purchase." He glanced toward Sandy. "There is no deed, no will, no written contract, and no legal basis supporting your claim." Then he looked back at me. "The lawsuit is dismissed." Just like that. Years of entitlement disappeared in one sentence. Before leaving the bench, the judge added one more ruling. Sandra and all occupants are ordered to vacate the property within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. 14 days. Not 3 months. Not another negotiation. 2 weeks. Outside the courthouse, Sandy refused to look at me. Tina muttered that I had ruined their lives. Beth quietly followed them toward the parking lot without saying a word. None of them apologized. None of them mentioned my father. The only thing they mourned was the house they thought they were going to inherit. 2 weeks later, I drove over one last time. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Boxes covered the lawn. Sandy climbed into an SUV without acknowledging me. Tina slammed the passenger door. Beth looked back once before the vehicle disappeared around the corner. And just like that, they were gone. I unlocked the front door with the same key I'd carried for 7 years. The house was silent, empty, peaceful. It almost felt like it had been holding its breath. I walked through every room slowly. The living room where my parents used to watch old movies. The kitchen where my mom baked pies every Thanksgiving. The hallway where Charlie used to wait every Sunday because he somehow always knew when I was coming. I opened the back door. Charlie, older now but still loyal, wandered into the yard, sniffed around for a moment, then lay down in his favorite patch of grass beneath the old maple tree. For the first time in years, the backyard felt like home again. Standing there, I realized something. I hadn't fought for a house. I'd fought for my father's dignity. I'd fought for my mother's memory. I'd fought for the place where my family had found hope after losing everything. Sandra thought she married into an inheritance. She never understood she had only been living inside someone else's act of love. And love, unlike greed, always leaves a paper trail when it's built with sacrifice.